the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A state of control.
Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. And this is a little bit different for us. We're here live at ISE 2023. And I have to first say hello to my co-host and my partner here at A State of Control, none other than Rich Fregosa.
Well, we're in meat space, right? Yeah, we talked it. We'll use the technical term. So, mellow Barcelona greetings from our Catalan province. So, no, it's good to be here. It's good to have a time. I have been running around quite a bit for AVNation, doing coverage for the show. So, this is my first chance to sit down all day. And what better way to sit down and talk with these chaps that I got in front of me?
And with us today on our show is Chris Deatrick. He is a product manager from AtlasIED. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, thank you. Nice to be here.
Thanks for being with us. Yeah. So we're here at ISE 2023. It's great that we have the opportunity to be in the Influencer Lounge. It's great for them to give us this great space for us to record. And why we're here is because the AV industry has really been advancing. Trade shows seem to be back. There's been a lot of crowds, very busy few days. We're not really going to focus on the show, but I think we're going to talk about the importance of being at trade shows and why, from a software perspective, from a programmer's perspective, why trade shows are really something that should be thought through and how manufacturers need these opportunities to meet with people like us, like Definitely. The other attendees. So Rich has been moving around, as he mentioned, talking to a whole bunch of manufacturers. So Rich, what are some of the things that you've heard at the show, and what are some of the trends that are important to programmers?
Well, the first thing that I've noticed is that the crowds are back. It's the first time in 3 years where I'm walking through a hallway and it is shoulder to shoulder and you're working through, and you kind of have that knee-jerk reaction of like, do I need to mask up again before I go through? I mean, so it's the feel of the big trade show again, but you still have a little bit of that PSD, of the PTSD of like, oh my God, I'm in this giant crowd of people again. But the overall show itself, I mean, everything's light. I mean, software's everywhere. Every booth that I've gone to has their own tool. That's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed, is that they are all purpose-driven tools per manufacturer, which is, again, opening up that can of worms. I've gone to several manufacturers, which it makes sense because, manufacturers are determining that because of the hybrid world. It isn't necessarily about partnering with a speaker manufacturer or an amplifier manufacturer or a display manufacturer. It's about partnering with a soft codec. It's about their partnerships with Zoom, with Teams, with BlueJeans. And so there's been a shift in what I've seen on the floor, where before, you would see a lot about the third-party development would be the biggest advertisement. Now the advertisements, or at least what they're presenting, is how they are looking to more tightly ingrain with a lot of the UC systems there. But they still don't answer some of the bigger questions when you get beyond kind of the sandbox that they've drawn. So it's interesting in that I see a lot of things moving in the right direction, in that, some of the manufacturers are saying, hey, we do have instances in a front row situation where we can go ahead and use our tool. We have our own dedicated device, and maybe it's a web page interface or a purpose-built interface that we've got on a touch screen, and we're going to use that to work. And some of it's phenomenal stuff, but a lot of it looked like it was the engineering team that put it together and not necessarily the user experience team that put it together. So it's almost like the early generation of our touch panels that I'm seeing just a little bit sleeker. But it's an interesting move in the right direction because we are seeing, and we've said it for quite some time, about software eating the world. It's no longer about the knobs and flipping the switches and the LEDs. Now it's becoming about widgets. It's becoming about extensions. It's becoming about hook-ins to Google or Edge, or how do these show up with the codecs with a USB-C interface. So that's been the interesting part for me. And it's like everything else we've talked about, right? I see it as opportunity. I think that it's like anything else. It starts the okay, but conversation. It's like, you've got a tool. It's fantastic. Okay. But what about this? And so I think manufacturers are figuring it out too, which is we have to be able to present something for our users. We can't consider that they'll have the budget for a third-party control system. So they're looking at us, and so we need to be able to provide something, at least for that first step, to say, we'll get you from point A to point B. And so, I think that's where I'm seeing is that it may even help us, because at that point they're saying, hey, look, if you do want to take it to the next level, then you've got to go down that road, which is a perfect segue. So it's for a manufacturer developer.
Yeah. I mean, I've said it a few times over the last couple of days, which is take away all the stuff, the outputs, the displays, the audio, the amplifier, all that stuff. As a software person, like, what can I do? That's all I care about. Can I do this? Can I do that? I don't care about, like, if I bought that exact widget or if what did the thing for me. But as defining a product, doing a product development, product manager, when I think about how I'm going to design something going forward, I've been thinking about it a lot. And I think that when you have, I want a widget that does Teams, or I want a widget that does Zoom, or I want a widget that integrates with X. And instead of coming from the bottom up, I guess is a way to say it, coming from the top down and just saying, this is how we want to define a product. This is how we want to release an API document out. These are the things that people want to do. And then you can figure out all of the manufacturer stuff,
Well, you're bringing up an interesting point, and one of the things that we want to say with Chris, I guess we need to properly introduce him,
Yeah.
which is we're just jumping right in.
Yeah. That's what we always do.
Yeah, well,
first we have to define the term API, if you wouldn't mind, only because that's one of the AVNation rules.
Oh, really?
So an API,
Application
if it's an
programming
acronym, you got to
interface.
spell it. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So kind of the
Right,
language that
right.
a product talks to other things.
Right.
So which is great, but so tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about
so-
your
sorry,
background.
I don't know where-
This is conversation. This is the way we do it.
So I'm a product manager. I did software for AtlasIED from 2004 to 2018. 2019, beginning of 2019, I became a product manager for the company. We didn't have a product management team at the time. Learned how to kind of define stuff. COVID hit, so the last 4 years now, it's been, we have a small product development team of 3 people, and whereas we had nothing before, and we're trying to give some boundaries around a growing, from traditionally manufacturer who just kind of, I remember when I started, they actually had the hardware engineers do the software, and it was, as you would expect.
Yeesh.
And so to start to put some definition around what you have to do, I mean, as an engineer, you can appreciate it more, because otherwise you're just off in nowhere land and not knowing if, I mean, I had I've developed several products where I from a software point of view, from an engineering point of view, developed the product, was told this was the product, people were going to buy this, did it, and then no one bought it. And then I didn't know if I was doing the right thing or if it was my fault or any of that stuff. And so I kind of, as time went on, I got a kind of a broader picture of the market and what it takes to go to market and stuff like that. And eventually became product management, and it's really helped me in this job.
And it's an interesting thing from the, I've had today I've had the opportunity to interview a lot of product managers, and it's interesting because it is a term that can mean a lot of different things based on what you're working on, where you're working, when you're bringing out a product or where you're refining a product, because you're straddling both worlds. Are you finding right now that we need a soft solution first that we present, that the hardware then fills in the gap? Or do you find that the call is we still need that box and now we need the software layer in between? Because from a manufacturing standpoint, that's always the challenge, right? Because you've got your customers, our dealers, who we work with, who are saying, we want something, but that's always the conflict, which is like, what do we give you? And we can't necessarily charge for it, but you're expecting it.
People, I've heard, we have an internal conflict, and I'm sure every manufacturer has the same internal conflict. You see Netflix or whatever it is charging them, whatever a month and being really successful. And I think that when you say, I had a senior software engineer tell me about a month or two ago that every company is a software company, they just don't realize it yet. And so I've kind of thought about it on and off, since then. Every and what he meant by that, and I think what it means is the push is there. Supply chains even increase that issue, right? Look at Dante, Automate Dante. They're software. They're pushing the software, and that's what I want to do. I don't want to have to be dependent on something, when as a developer, I want to go in, sit down, make sure the thing works before I'm going to sit down in a coffee shop. I don't want to sit down in a equipment room and code it,
So it's funny because the average control system programmer, usually programming comes last.
Yes.
So it's really encouraging, and I think a lot of people will find it very invigorating to hear that software drives products rather than the system is designed and then you program it to do something. Yeah,
that's what I was trying at the very beginning. I've been thinking about that for the last week or two about how to define. I have to define a next generation ecosystem of some sort. How to define all of the things. It's almost impossible. But when you start saying, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and from a product point of view, it kind of flows in. You will need some sort of, to define some sort of XLR, and if I have 2 of them or 20 of them or whatever, at that point, sure. But from a software point of view, I don't really care. I just have, for I equals 1 to X, right, or whatever, and that's really what way I approached it in my head.
You mentioned before about products that you developed weren't necessarily well received.
Yeah.
From our standpoint, and I'm sure you've experienced this, you have to do that at least minimally viable product approach, and then
definitely.
iterate.
Right.
And that's something that we're still getting used to in the AV control programming world.
That's right.
Any advice as to how to go about doing that, approaching that? How did you handle that when that happened, and what changes did you make the next time?
That's one reason why I'm here, is going straight to the customer. And so when I sit there and I watch someone play with a device of some sort, and what are the commonalities of the questions they're asking? Oh, they're all asking about, can I have this? Well, that's probably not it. That's probably part of the MVP. Whereas maybe one guy asked it because he has this one job in a hotel somewhere. That put that on the to-do list, and that's kind of how I'm approaching the problem, at least structurally, so that I can have some sort of MVP when I come out of all this.
So a lot of listening, coming up with an idea.
Coming up with an idea, and then having something that's different is, I think, a big key. I think a lot of engineers, and this is what I'm learning now, right? I was in engineering for years and doing product now. The engineers don't get exposed to the marketing and the sales side as much. And so to have this exposure and to see exactly like how people are selling it, and to see how it kind of fits in context with everything else. Is this really what the person that was developing it thought that they were doing? You know, there's a disconnect there, and so now I'm still learning some of that stuff. You know,
It's encouraging.
Yeah.
Rich, how could we apply this to our world?
Well, that's the question I'm going to lead in, and actually I'm going to toot your horn right now on this one. So, we're seeing manufacturers are finding out that we need to partner, we need to create tools to be able to work with third-party manufacturers, with third-party control systems. The problem, though, is that right now, like you were talking about, resources aren't always there to be able to execute everything necessary. And so companies like Control Concepts just announced today that they became an official QSys partner, a development partner, along with our good friend Ollie Hall over at Ultimation. And really this is the question, because again, it's great to have a manufacturer representative on board. How do you find bridging that gap when you do have the control systems out there, and Atlas has great relationships with a lot of the control manufacturers along with your own ecosystem, partnering, and how does it become a matter of how do you deal with it from a product development standpoint, going, okay, we've got to deal with our own APIs, we've got to deal with our own control interface. What do we have to do when we get a request from them saying, oh, by the way, we've got 15 touch panels in this combined space already, and we've got this university or something that's already been outfitted for X number of years, because from the control system programming standpoint, right, it's like, okay, well, you call companies in like ours, right, and you've got companies who do one-offs. I dip my foot in both sides on the resi and the commercial space. Resi has a whole different list of demands, but commercial, you're talking, I know, especially with Atlas, you've got, possibly an airport, you've got, universities, you've got school systems, you've got K-12, you've got transportation hubs, you're across so many different verticals.
So I started in the airport stuff. I started on the IED banner, and we have, the transportation side of AtlasIED now is 80% of the U.S. market of airports, and it is really hard to separate that customized stuff out, because you can walk into an airport, and they say, even airport to airport, they say, no airport. When you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport.
What's the great thing about standards? There's so many to choose from.
Seriously.
So that's our struggle now, is trying to standardize and have a good kind of base of product line, but yet still maintain that customization and that thing where you walk into someplace, they may have something built 40 years ago. How do you work with it?
Well, people say to us all the time, it's a typical boardroom, it's a typical home, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, this will be easy for you.
Yes, yeah.
So one of the things that we try to advocate for, and we talk about a lot on the show, is really we have to grow up as an industry a little bit.
Yes.
We need to start to adopt more modern software development practices.
Absolutely.
We need to look at things beyond just our four walls.
Yes.
Is that something that you can speak to for our audience and help them?
I started out in 2004, and our system was based on DOS. So I understand.
We've both been
there.
I understand even at that time, that was old. So how to push that envelope a little bit. And when you have kind of a traditionally, I don't want to say it negatively, because traditional audio 70s hi-fi guys, or whatever you would say, like when you're trying to get those people kind of, look, this may work, a bunch of buttons and knobs and like a little tweak here and a tweak there, but today and with IT, if somebody has to do that, they'll just walk away, and it's a struggle. So to speak to it as far as like the way I'm trying to push it, or what I'm trying to do, I know that there's not a lot of stuff I don't understand, and I know that we are not Google, but I want to try to at least try and push things a little bit more on. whatever the trend is. So encouraging our teams to have up-to-date knowledge on cloud-based stuff, or whatever they see out there, and to not just say, okay, this is something that I do on my phone, or this is something I do on my laptop. This is something I could apply to actual, like, a product that we make. I've had some success, but it's and I think it will be for a long time. It'll be a battle until like you said, the industry grows up a bit, and we start saying, oh, wow, this is what people, IT world, AV, like, there's different expectations, and once we can kind of rise to those expectations, I think that's when there'll be some kind of synergy. Synergy, right?
It's happening, exactly.
Right.
We've talked about it so many times, or the convergence, right?
Convergence, convergence. Where someone off the street, layman, can come off the street and know how to maybe program a powerful system. Maybe not all the bits and pieces of it, but something very basic. And some of the products we have at here, like Atmosphere, that those kind of concepts have tried to be true to those.
Sure. Well, you mentioned, Rich, earlier that you were seeing more trends in software. So, what are some of those that we can grab hold of that could be a good point that programmers can maybe provide value to the industry outside of what we're already doing?
A big part of the opportunity, I think, is that it's easy to get discouraged thinking, oh, the manufacturer's doing it now, there's no value for me, and it's not the case. We've talked about it so many times as we deal with that inferiority complex at times, where it's like, okay, well, we have a hard time as a collective, as the programmers, of saying, no, we bring value to the party. We're getting from point A to point B, because manufacturers, their resources, they're limited. There's only so much they can do with the product. It's not that you don't want to push the product out to be that Swiss Army knife. It's just there's so many hours, so many people, and right. You got to get that thing out the door. And I think that for programmers, sometimes it's just perspective, right? Because God forbid that manufacturers put information on their spec sheets that don't necessarily really occur in the real world, right? So a big part of, for our audience, of the fellows who are out there, is you need to be able to, you need to know your product, you need to know their product. And, we've talked about it constantly, which is, you got to dog food it. You have to be able to pull up Atmosphere stuff, or what Vadio is doing with their new configuration tool, or what Teams is doing with the next iteration of Front Row. I saw a 31:9 screen for the first time with dual displays. That's a challenge, because now you're changing these spaces. Well, what if it stops being just a Teams presentation? They go, oh, by the way, we still want to be able to PowerPoint. We still want to be able to have the C-level suite meetings here. And for the oddest reason in the world, oh, by the way, can we still get CNN and CNBC and these other things? And they go, well, it's this wide. So now you're starting to think about, okay, microtiles. There are so many opportunities in terms of video switching, video display technology, AV over IT. The manufacturers that I've worked with, they are getting, the beauty of software is that it allows us to provide sophisticated solutions. The problem with software is that we've got sophisticated solutions that make it difficult to be accessible unless you're the guy who likes clicking. And so, much like, the Resi approach and really anything that we've ever voiced across, the key is that simplicity isn't necessarily require less effort. Simplicity requires more effort, and becoming that value solution, and taking what they've jumped off of. And I think what's nice, and what I'm noticing more and more, is that the manufacturers are willing to engage, and they are willing to say, hey, okay, we know we haven't taken it this far. Here's where we are with our API. I'm seeing, and especially with some of the manufacturers, there's much more. It's not this black magic where, you and I have signed so many NDAs in our careers in the past, right? Where it was the secret sauce, right? Yes. It was like we were literally had nuclear codes in our hand, which was basically how to turn something on and off.
Yep, that's right. They never knew what we were going to do with it. Why would you need such a thing?
I had this conversation today, actually.
Literally, we used to have paper files that you would covet.
Yeah,
that would be your intellectual property. It was paper.
Yeah, it was. You'd spend months negotiating with the manufacturer to literally just be able to turn something on and off. Yeah. It was like state secrets at that point. But then when you were those guys, right? And that was it. It was an industry of scarcity, and I think that we are seeing, like you were talking about, that ability to grow and share. But as a business, you have to be willing to spot those opportunities and work with them, because that is applying your craft at that point. And like I said, I commend you for what you're doing, because you spotted that trend years ago, and now you're starting to see that blossom through, which was, we've been at it 10 years talking, not even more really, but I know 10 years aggressively having those conversations with manufacturers and with product managers over these specific things.
It's about trying to figure out where can you better the industry,
right?
But also who's responsible for this area and specialize in it, and then you can give that out so that other people can take it and run with it. One of the questions that I had as we start to wrap up is, Atmosphere is a product that is very software upgradable. Yep. And I think that's kind of new to people. Usually they say, I need to put in a new product when this one is end of life, or when they want the next greatest thing. That's just a new concept, I think. Talk a little bit about that, and about what power a manufacturer has in focusing on, instead of producing new hardware components, producing new software, because for some it's just very hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah, sure. Well, it allows us for a lot of flexibility. When you, as a programmer, sometimes, when's it going to be done? When's it going to be done? And it'll never be done. So it allows us to release product earlier than in the cycle than maybe as typical engineering cycle you'd maybe want to. But then the day of the trade show, or whenever you want, you can upgrade it to the latest and greatest and say, this is what we've got today, and the developer could have been working on it last night, so
let's hope not.
Not that any of us have ever done that.
Right. But it's that's great, because what it does is it doesn't and this is, it doesn't put you in the slave. It doesn't put you as a slave to the engineer, and so that's really the key for us, is having the ability to upgrade as you go. For Atmosphere, for example, we've released a new product with integrated amplifier for Atmosphere, which comes with a new firmware. So the question is, for Atmosphere, do we want to release? Does our existing Atmosphere take the firmware upgrade? And the answer is yes. So someone that's out there still can get all the new features without the built-in amplifier, but doesn't have to maybe strip it out or put in a new one. And that's something that on the integrator side is hugely flexible. So.
It's interesting because Apple does the same thing. You sort of get a new phone even though you didn't get any new hardware.
Right.
Yeah. What does that mean for our industry, do you think? Because I think a lot of integrators are very hardware centric.
I think the pandemic and the supply chain issues taught us a lot of what we can do. You and I have had this gripe in the past. I think that when we had these riches, this embarrassment of riches of resources, we got kind of lazy. And because we always just expected there's more resources and more processors. It's new. It'll X, it'll Y, it'll Z. And then we found out that we couldn't get those. And I know for me, I had to get real creative and go, I've got a 10-year-old processor sitting out there. I got to make what's there work now and go back to being creative. And we talked about it with the early days of, even restaurant programming. We used to program on IC chips, and we had only so many loads that we could get in until I used to keep a little tube of replacement EEPROM chips, because it was like,
Same.
For me, not that we fortunately ever have to go back to that scarcity of resources where we were literally fighting for every bite, to get something running. I think it was an opportunity to look at things differently, to say, you know what, I can do a lot of things in a software world that, as long as I've got minimum processing power, to be able to execute. And we're seeing it now. I mean, the supply chain has caused us to go to virtual processors. We've been talking about it forever, but we're now starting to see these things come out. You could theoretically run a building off of a virtual server. You don't necessarily have to be sitting there with silicon. You could run it. Now, would I trust it necessarily? Not yet, but it doesn't mean it's not possible now. And we're seeing some of the product out there, which are, due to supply chain issues, the old boxes that we were used to seeing, and had IR ports and COM ports and relays and everything else. It's a NUC.
Yep.
It's a NUC. And we're saying, okay, well, gosh, I didn't need that stuff anymore, because thank God we're not, hand soldering DP25s anymore. But it's again, like we talked about, it's opportunity. You can look at it one of two ways, right? You could bemoan the facts that, it's not like the way it used to be, and the embarrassment of riches. Or we can say, okay, we're moving into that new direction, and it requires, like we've always said, building up your chops. You can't expect to do things the way you've always done them to keep you going forward in the ways you want to do them.
Yes.
You're gonna hit a wall fast.
Yes.
I think that's our lesson of the day.
There we go. Uncle Richie's Fireside Chat made it all the way across.
Absolutely. Any closing thoughts? I mean, one thing that I think about is, are we moving to a more software-driven AV world?
Absolutely. I as a software guy, right? And I didn't come to the AV world from AV. I came to the AV world from software, and to have to see kind of how it's matured and grown has been encouraging, even to thus far, and to see and to just. Yes.
Well, that's the best way to do it.
We can leave it at that. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. This is Chris Deatrick from AtlasIED, product manager. How can people get in touch with you, learn more about AtlasIED, and also continue the conversation?
We're here at the show in Exhibit Hall 3, and you can just go onto our website. It's AtlasIED.com. We're on all the social media platforms and everything like that.
Great. And get in touch with you personally?
I'm also on social media if you want to get on LinkedIn, or just write me an email address. It's chris.deatrick@AtlasIED.com.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
Get ready for the flood of...
Make sure you email Chris.
Yeah.
He's got a lot to share. It's always great being in person with you.
It is. It's been a while. I know.
Yeah.
We had a couple of hit and misses in between, but we made it.
We're going to get on this tour.
That's
Maybe it's
exactly.
going to be a static control on the road.
There we go. Coming at you, different counties, right? It'll be like this. It'll be like the furniture guys, but we'll just be the programmer guys, right?
But once we hit 100 episodes, all bets are off.
That's it.
Now we have to renew our contract.
That's it.
How can people get in touch with you, Rich, and learn more about what you're up to?
Well, you can find me on the socials, obviously, at R Fregosa. You can find the company, FregosaDesign.com. But I hope that you, please, because I've been working my butt off this week.
That's right.
I hope the one place you can track me down the most is on AVNation.tv, where I am providing, along with Toby Tunji, we are going back and forth between the studio and on the floor. He and I are providing all of your ISE 2023 coverage here in a little chilly Barcelona. It's not like it was in summer for me, but that's the place that I'd love for you to find me, here on AVNation.tv, of course on our show, but all the suite of episodes. I'll be recording AV Week here from Barcelona as well, so you and I will be having some conversations coming up.
You got it. So that's AVNation.tv, and please do check out all the content. Rich and Toby have worked real hard on that. Paige is doing a great job in the background, and she deserves us the credit for connecting us with Chris, and we thank her for that.
And thanks to ISE for providing us the space and the Influencers Lounge. I mean, they've been really fantastic for us.
So if you haven't been to ISE Integrated Systems Europe, please check that out, and maybe you want to consider that in the future. But we'll continue to bring content to you from here. And for me, you could reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. You can reach my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. And I do some writing for various publications. I also have another podcast that Rich was recently on called Ask the Programmer. So check that out as well. James King and I host that. And it's a little bit of a different format, but same type of content for this audience. And that's what we have for today. And this has been A State of Control.